For today, on this Saturday, we are talking about a pseudo borrowed power that we're gonna get in 11.1.7, which is just going to be a similar repeat of what we got in 11.0.7, something that quite many of us are still using, which is the Cyrce's Circlet, the ring, the socketable ring, which at this point most players are just using as a mega stat stick with much oversized stat points, even though it's just 658 item level. For many, it is still competing with much higher item level rings. The intent of Blizzard went a bit overshot the idea of being on par with heroic level rings of this season. It went a bit more powerful than that. What we have though in 11.1.7, so presumably something that is going to come out in about a month, like 5-6 weeks or so, is another piece, this time in a different slot, which supposedly will carry you into Season 3, very similar to the Cyrce's Circlet. This time though, it's not a ring, this time it's a belt. It is the Durable Information Securing Container, also known as D.I.S.C. Now this one will be a much more expedited way to gain this power. It's not going to be tied to a new zone that you have to go into, collect all of the different gems. This one is just going to be tied to delves this time around. Once the patch launches, you will find Dagran Torisan next to Bran in the delve hub. In Dornogal, he will give you a quest to go in one of the overcharged delves. That's the new thing in 11.1.7. You will go in your map and you will see some sparkling electricity next to a couple of delves on the map. That sparkle indicates that the delve has been overcharged, meaning that much like when the delves are bountiful and you have extra mobs based on the bountiful type, the goblins of this patch being present in your delves, now with overcharge you're gonna have a bunch of robots, a bunch of constructs in your delves. And this can stack, by the way. You can have a bountiful delve also being overcharged and find both of the overcharged type of mobs and the bountiful type of mobs in the same delve. Dagran will just give you about 3 or so quests to go and complete the delves. That's the main thing. When a delve is overcharged, it can be repeated. It's not like the bountiful delve, which is just once per day. The overcharged delve will stay there for the entirety of the day. You can basically rerun it however much you want. Now, this is gonna be useful because inside of the overcharged delve, once you defeat the different types of overcharged mobs, you will get to loot the Titan Disc shards. These are what you are going to be spending on the overcharged Titan console, which you will find at the entrance of the delve, right next to the Bran console to customize your companion, which is just going to be another way to steroid up your power in the delve. Okay, once it gets fully maxed, you will have something like 15% more primary stat, 20% more mastery, 30% crit, stacking, haste up to 30% more haste, 30% more move speed inside of the delve. All of these very annoying overcharged puddles of electricity all around the delve. Now you can actually step on them to gain 30% more damage as well. So it's just a way to make you even more powerful inside of the delve. Yes, only this power, these discs you loot inside of the delves, are just for your extra power within the delve itself. As for the item, by the time you have done a couple of these delves and completed the quest, which is just about, killing the mobs, the overcharged mobs, and completing the overcharged delve, Dagran will actually give you your belt. And once you actually have the belt in your hands, now you're gonna get this weekly quest about receiving your Titan memory card, which is very reminiscent to what we had with the Cyrce's Circlet, the weekly item to upgrade your ring by 4 item levels. This one will do the same to your belt. Now, for now, at the very least, the belt is given to you at item level 684, which is basically just 1 item level below the very soon incoming item level increase, right? The current mid-track gear sitting at 678, just in a few days with the next patch will be able to be upgraded to 685. So this delve will be given to you about the same item level as a current belt, and then week by week, once 11.1.7 hits, you will be able to bring it at 688, 692, 696, and then 670 after 4 weeks of this weekly upgrade level. Now, what does this belt do though? Because this belt has no sockets, unlike the Circe's Circlet, right? It has no sockets because it is going to have also its own console, meaning that once you have the belt equipped, you can right-click on the belt and simply choose the kind of belt you want for yourself. This is already much more comfortable to use than the ring, other than having to juggle around whatever 9 different gems in your inventory. Now, this is just gonna be its own console. Similar to the ring, you actually start with just 2 of the effects, the damage one and the healing one, and then the other 7 will be discovered as drops inside the different delves. You will be able to see by very literally hovering over the locked effects where they actually drop. That disc has been lost within whichever delve. So you have to go inside the moment the delve is overcharged. So once the delve will be overcharged on a daily basis, they will be rotating. So you go complete that overcharged delve and get the disc for unlocking that power tied to that delve in your belt. So basically within a week, not even a week of the patch releasing, you will have rotated through all of the different delves, meaning you will have gotten access to all of the different power-ups of this belt. Now the main difference between this belt and the ring is the fact that this belt will not have something like the Circe's Circlet, which is an omni-use multi-stat setup. This setup is practically used by 95% of the users of the ring. They just take all 3 different gems that have something to do with secondary stats, right? This has also proven to be very handy nowadays because the effect of the Circe's Circlet snapshots to your current stats. So imagine you have currently more haste than crit, but you really want to stack crit. So what you can do, for example, is remove a couple of your haste items, so your haste goes below your crit, or maybe even use a crit flask, so your crit goes above your haste, re-equip the Circe's Circlet. Now that your crit is higher than your haste, the Circlet with the gem to increase your highest secondary is gonna select crit, and then you can re-equip your haste gear. So it's very, it's very malleable, it's very customizable in where you want to select your main stat for that ring. The thing with the belt is that this belt right now doesn't actually have anything to do with hitting basically all of your secondary stats. You have the electric current, which once you enter combat, you're going to be gaining mastery, and then it's gonna take 24 seconds for you to max stack that mastery, and then the cycle will begin again. You then have static charge, which is just gonna flat out have a proc of versatility for 30 seconds, but every time you use an ability, that proc effect will be reduced by 5%. You then have the haste proc. This is much more simple. It's a 20-second haste proc, very similar to a trinket, and then you have the stacking crit, which will continuously stack your crit, but it won't refresh the duration, so the proc will always be 20 seconds. It will just continue to increase the crit of the effect. And that's it. Those are the only secondary stat effects you can find. 1 for each. 1 for haste, 1 for crit, 1 for mastery, and 1 for verse. And the belt itself, of course, doesn't have any secondary stats. It just has the main primary stat number, and then the rest is empty. It's just based on the one effect you can choose, unlike the Circe's Circlet, right? If this was the Circe's Circlet, then you would have said, okay, I'm gonna select the haste proc and the crit proc because those are my 2 best stats. In here, you can only choose 1. You have 1 of each secondary stat, and then you have the single target damage healing proc and the AoE damage dealing proc. You also have the single target healing proc, and then the AoE healing proc, as well as the self-absorb shield on yourself. These are pretty much the only currently available effects you can put on your belt. That's why perhaps the belt might not be nearly as powerful or nearly as used as the Circe's Circlet. since the Circlet was giving you quite a lot of power in terms of secondary stats, but this one won't really reach that number. You will have to have some quite overtuned effects if you wanted to power up your character, or rather you might have certain specs having a lot of value or looking for a lot of value on a single stat. You know, some specs really wanting to go for haste, and this haste proc, this spark burst haste proc would have to be very powerful for you to actually drop a normal belt with a bunch of haste on it to contend with this belt effect. We will see, of course. It will be up to balancing just how powerful this belt will become, just based on the difference in item levels. This will still be on the same level of a heroic belt next tier, so still you will be able to keep this at the beginning of the season as a quite powerful belt, because you will begin with the belt at 700 item level, so it will definitely be the strongest option you can have. So you can hold back on doing things like crafting, right, your first item being a belt, for example, or favoring some vault gear being a belt if you have this one. But later on, it does seem like, for now at least, it will have less of an impact in terms of value as the Circe's Circlet. Maybe, it is to be said, maybe Blizzard even overshot the value of this ring that they gave us in 11.0.7, because it definitely went far above the initial statements of Blizzard saying they wanted this to be on par with heroic rings, and nowadays this is quite a bit above the value of heroic rings. So maybe it's actually intentional to make this belt not nearly as powered up as this ring once 11.1.7 comes. Also, as a last note, no, of course, you want to be able to later down the line, when in your vault you are already down to picking sockets, you won't be able to socket this belt either. So we will see just exactly how powerful will Blizzard decide to make this belt, if they will stick to their original announcement of the ring and just make it a decent alternative to heroic gear, or if it will end up being just as powerful as the Circe's Circlet and start contending with and possibly even beating mythic value level belts in the next season. However, for today, on this Saturday, we are done with the overview of what we're gonna get as a, pseudo borrowed power in 11.1.7. So, for today, it is now time to leave each other. We are starting, as usual, the goodbyes by thanking everyone for having watched the video, together with, of course, everyone else who has been supporting completely for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, I'm fine, as long as it's free loot. I don't mind too much if I have to replace it by the time I get to heroic or by the time I get to mythic. At the very least, it was free.